A national election is less than a year away, and politicians are concerned with fence mending as well as with the international crisis. You know, it's just possible that President Truman might have made a recent fumble which will gain points for the opposing team. But we'll tell you about that in just a moment. Just after my introductory headline story, it ensures greater attention to the commercial message. This program is designed as an informative feature which we believe will attract an audience of quality as well as quantity. We shall present the outstanding controversies, and we'll bring to you the outstanding people in public affairs. Bring them in person, and they shall present their official or personal points of view. We'll bring you these and these. And we'll always try to show both sides of every issue. We will not sensationalize, but we do intend to bring you the sensations behind the scenes of news in our nation's capital. And now here's our first story. The White House is the symbol of the president, a man who has so many worries. Broad attacks followed the president's order authorizing all executive agencies and departments to classify information, withholding anything that might be considered vital to national security. Well, promptly, the Office of Price Stabilization ordered its employees to withhold anything that might be embarrassing to OPS. The president said, no, that's not the idea. He says the order is not meant to allow agencies to cover mistakes. But the public wonders, do we get full information about what happens in Washington now? Can any observer give us complete reports?
No comment. No comment.
Do press conferences produce facts?
No comment. No comment.
In the Senate, opposition has been led by Senator John W. Bricker of Ohio.
Mr. Hughes, the Congress under the Constitution is the policy-making power of the federal government. It has full authority, in my judgment, to repeal the President's executive order. They did so in regard to Regulation W. This does not involve a question of military secrecy or of atomic energy secrecy in any way, shape, or form. Full power is given under the military laws and under the Atomic Energy Act to protect the security of the country in those matters. In this gag rule of the President's, which was handed out to all the departments, authority is given to thousands of federal employees to mark any information in their judgment they want to as top secret, as confidential, or as restricted. In my judgment, this rule ought to be repealed by the Congress. The American people are entitled to know what their money is spent for, and they're entitled to know what their servants in the federal government are doing.
I searched several civilian agencies but could find no important Washington official who would appear here in flat defense of the presidential order, which could bring the famous stamps of regulation into all phases of government information. Publishers, editors, and reporters were quick to attack the threat of censorship. This is Jack Turcotte, war correspondent and veteran reporter for the New York Daily News. Jack, what do you think about this presidential security order?
As you know, John, reporters do a very honest and patriotic job. During the war, hundreds of war correspondents, newspaper men, knew all sorts of things about the armed forces, had top secret plans, and never did one violate a confidence. The fact is that a newspaper man has an instinct for digging for news, and that instinct gets sharpened very, very much if anybody tries to keep something from him. I don't say that the president is trying to keep from the people of the United States things of national importance, but I do say that somebody in the administration is trying to keep from newspapers, and has been trying for the last 2 months, to withhold information about scandals such as the RFC and the income tax, things that have happened. That's how I feel about it.
When the United States was born, Thomas Jefferson said, "If left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without government, I should not hesitate for a moment to prefer the latter." One recurring furor behind the scenes in Washington occurs with each visit of royalty. Princesses and queens and kings are much more glamorous than prime ministers and people's commissars. They also call for greater protection. Weeks of careful planning and organization by hundreds of men in the FBI, the Secret Service, and the armed forces result in a smoothly functioning machinery of protection for the royal party at every turn, move, and stop. 1,000 minor chores attend the social side of the royal visit, and prestige-hungry society, lacking its own titles of nobility, frantically push and shove to bask in the reflected glory. leaders of Washington society scheme and maneuver to secure invitations to the royal receptions and dinners. And jealous hostesses pull strings among the mighty in the faint hope that they'll be permitted to entertain the distinguished visitors. When our first president declined to accept the title of King of the United States, he played a rather dirty trick on certain Washingtonians whose great heritage is the regret they cannot be Baroness of Baltimore, Countess of Chesapeake, or Duchess of Delaware. As we approach 1952, 20 governments are considering ratification of a constitution drafted at the London Parliamentary Conference on World Government. This so-called World Government Constitution provides for armed forces to ensure peace, provides for control of the size of national police forces, national armies, for control of arms manufacture, and demands the peaceful and legal settlement of international disputes. World government, of course, is not a new idea. The League of Nations was a hopeful proposal born of World War I. Union now offered too little and came too late. The Atlantic Charter had political as well as military significance, but alliance factors were obscured by war. The One World idea stimulated support for the United Nations, chartered in San Francisco and ratified by 59 governments of the world. The United Nations has shown many defects. Economic and ideological problems stand in the way of human agreement. But Albert Einstein says it's either world government or atomic destruction. President Truman has said the nations of the world are not ready as the 13 colonies were ready to join together in one single government. Between mere treaty relationships and world federation are many proposals of limited alliance. One calm course is that proposed by Senator Estes Kefauver of Tennessee. Senator, what is your Atlantic Union resolution?
The Atlantic Union resolution provides simply that the President call a conference of the people of the nations that have signed the North Atlantic Treaty to see how far they can go in the creation of a federal union. The democracies always unite for the purpose of winning a war, so this is an effort to have them unite for the purpose of preventing the war. The Atlantic Union resolution does not delegate any more of our sovereignty than we have already delegated in the North Atlantic Pact. It would simply mean that we would have some say-so in what other nations would do in taking action that might get us into war. That is what we seek to prevent, war. We want to preserve our liberty and our peace and our freedom. And the Atlantic Union resolution, I think, is the best means of doing that.
One leader among Senate opponents of any scheme for world federation is Senator George W. Malone of Nevada, who feels this threatens our sovereignty.
This is the final chute that they're driving the public of the United States into, and that is a federation of nations, each with one vote, so that they can tax us, on their ability to pay on the old Karl Marx socialist principle with all of the nations of the world, finally, starting with the Atlantic nations, and then they can vote the taxes on the American people themselves without the unhandy and probably impossible from now on coming to the Congress of the United States. In other words, we'll have nothing whatever to say about it from now on except have one vote, just like England, just like France, and I am against it.
Actually, we now have functioning elements of world government in the broad mechanism of the United Nations. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, formed as a defensive alliance, has the basic structure of a law enforcement agency for an anti-war federation. In the final analysis, the decision on our approach to world government is up to you. Your representatives, your federal government, will depend for their decisions upon the sum total of your opinion. It is in your minds to be determined how far and how fast we shall go, or how far and how fast we shall retreat. Then we have many interesting features planned, including visits with the great, the near great, and the little people behind the scenes. We'll talk with the people who make headlines and with the people who make things tick. This is Mr. William Jackman, president of the Investors League, an organization of stockholders, the real owners of America. Mr. Jackman, what's wrong with our tax system?
What's wrong with it? What's right with it?
Our entire tax structure is political hodgepodge from one end to the other. Free enterprise in America was not a heritage, but rather a system that was brought about by the frugality of small investors throughout the land. We need a complete revision of our entire tax
I'm
code.
sorry, Mr. Jackman, but our time is up for now. Next week at this same time, we'll have Mr. Jackman back and some Washington authorities for a close-up of this problem of our tax system. See you then.
Spotlight. The important question under discussion today is, should Germany be made an equal partner in the North Atlantic Alliance? And here to discuss that are our special guests, Senator William Knowland of California, a Republican, and Congressman Emanuel of New York, a Democrat. We want to talk to some people on the street, but first, here's something else of interest. Earlier today, we talked with some of the representative Americans that you meet down at the Capitol steps. And here we are at the Capitol steps to get some representative opinion. May I ask your name, please?
Miss Elizabeth Webb.
Where are you from, Miss Webb?
I live in Georgetown, but I'm originally from North Carolina.
As you know, perhaps, Miss Webb, our subject today is, should Germany be a partner in the North Atlantic Alliance? What's your view of that?
Oh, yes, I think so. I keep remembering that after the First World War, we made the mistake of not helping the liberal forces in Germany quickly enough. Eventually, we'll have to recognize Germany as a full-fledged nation. And if we do it now, it will bolster up the liberal friendly forces in Germany.
You're afraid we'll repeat the mistake we made after Versailles?
Yes, and by doing that, we would be playing into the very worst hands inside Germany.
Thank you very much, Miss Webb. Now, may I ask your name, please?
Sanford H. Bowles.
Mr. Bowles, where are you from?
Well, I'm an attorney in Washington, but I'm originally from Albany, New York.
And what do you think about bringing Germany in as a full partner in NATO?
Well, I certainly don't think they should be admitted at the present time, certainly not until they've earned the right to be accepted back into the family of decent, peace-loving nations.
But granted, we need them for the defense of Western Europe. You feel that, do you?
Oh, I certainly do, because I would not be inclined to trust them if they weren't willing to come in on the basis of having earned their right to participate in the defense of Western Europe.
In other words, you think we've got to ask them to take a limited partnership at the beginning?
Well, I think that we would be risking miscalculation and taking a calculated risk on those who aren't willing to participate without being guaranteed full equality when they haven't earned it yet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowles. Now, your name, please?
Irvin G. Schutte.
What's your view, Mr. Schutte, on Germany as a full partner?
My view on that question is that they should be given equal rights in the program.
You feel we can't defend Western Europe without a German army, do you?
The reason I say that is that if they do not participate in this program and are governed under limitations, and I think that the people will have a suppression feeling, and consequently we will not receive the full benefits and support.
They feel they're second-class citizens and they won't really participate.
Indeed so.
Thank you, Mr. Schutte. Here we've had some representative opinions at the Capitol. Now we're going to ask the first of our two special guests, Senator Knowland, to sum up his views on this important subject.
Well, I believe that Germany should be brought into the NATO Defense Organization at once, because it is quite clear that you cannot have an effective defense against communist aggression in Europe unless there is a German participation. We don't want a Korea being made out of Germany.
Thank you, Senator. And now you have a minute, Congressman Seller, to sum up your view.
I agree with Senator Knowland that Germany must be admitted into NATO as a full-fledged partner, but I believe that admission should be eventual and should be earned. Those are the words of General Eisenhower, namely that the inclusion should be eventual and earned. I think in our haste to admit Germany as a full-fledged partner in NATO, we are sort of running from fog to bog, and that we are not putting first things first. We haven't as yet a peace treaty between the Western Allies and Germany. I think, secondly, we have not straightened out the situation between France and Germany. France has great perturbation and turbulence of mind. They were overrun twice by the Boche and the Nazis. And way back in 1870, likewise, fought a war against Germany. So that they must be made to feel comfortable with the admission of Germany. They're not yet comfortable. And we cannot have a European army unless we have a satisfied French.
Thank you, Congressman Seller. Well, gentlemen, the discussion is open. I'd like to put a question to you first, Congressman Seller, and that is to whether or not you think we have time for them to earn this right in view of the communist threat from the East.
I think Germany has as much to fear from a communist threat from the East as the Western Allies have. And that Germany, if threatened with a force that would be equivalent to panzer divisions endeavoring to overrun her territories, she would respond and would endeavor to worst the Russians, just as the Western Allies would. So that Germany has as much to fear from communist aggression as we have.
Senator Knowland, what about, we're hearing more and more, I notice Congressman Seller has a news story here, about the rise of a new Nazism in Germany. Isn't that a threat if we give them a complete military establishment today?
Well, I think of course, there's a possibility of that happening. I think it is a remote possibility, however, if we encourage the liberal elements in Germany and those who desire to maintain a free republic in that country. And I think at the present time, an overwhelming number of the Germans, both of the government of the day and the opposition Socialist Party, will have no truck with either the extreme Nazi element, which is a small minority, or the extreme communist element, which is a small minority in Western Germany.
May I comment on that? You did advert to a news report I have of Mr. McCloy, and he cites the growth of neo-Nazism on the date of February 27th. And he says that that would be most baneful if neo-Nazism in Germany were not abated and were not scotched and curbed. But we do know that there is considerable number of forces in Germany, particularly among the German veterans, the German generals. Why, in the Foreign Office in Germany, a majority of those in control of policy are German former generals and high officials in the military, so that we have to be sure that Nazism will be scotched and will not come into power again.
I would like to ask Senator Knowland whether he thinks it's a risk to use former German generals who may have had Nazi connections.
Well, I think that if they were the party generals, that is, the extreme Nazis, it would be dangerous to use them. But there are a number who participated in the attempt to get rid of Hitler, and I think that they could be safely used there, and there are a group of younger officers coming up. I would like to refer, if I might, to Mr. Childs, to this question of time that you asked.
Earning period.
That's right, that you asked Congressman Seller. I think time is a priceless ingredient in this problem that we're now facing with the Soviet Union. And I don't think that we can afford to delay for any considerable period, because the Soviet Union has 120 divisions in Eastern Germany and Eastern Europe, as well as in the Soviet Union itself. They are building up their power in Eastern Germany, and as I pointed out in my opening remarks, I think that unless we are very careful, we may have another Korea develop, where the Eastern Germans will be amply armed by the Russians and will be able to overwhelm Western Germany.
What is your comment on that, Congressman Seller?
I don't think we are far apart in our viewpoints. I believe also that Germany should be admitted to NATO. It's a question of time.
But have we got time?
Yes, I think we have time. I don't think Russia is ready, or Russia would dare spring at Germany or any of the Western democracies. She's not ready yet. But the point I'm trying to make is this, that we should not place Germany in such a bargaining position that she can exploit that position. Now, she's exploiting it. We're fawning upon the Germans. We're forgetting that there has been 2 wars in one generation.
I wanted to ask...
I think what we should do is to go into this cautiously and then safely. And we shouldn't simply say, come in, you're already a partner. See the conditions that she laid down. She's laid down some very serious conditions.
Isn't the American public getting the idea that we are sending divisions to Germany to defend Germany while the Germans are doing nothing themselves?
Well, I think that's a very good point, because the American public is fully familiar with what has happened in Korea. Now, there we're supposed to be in a collective security action. But the fact of the matter is that here, 18 months after the war broke out, we are furnishing more than 90% of the troops in Korea, and we're suffering 93% of the casualties.
Well,
now, what
think,
we
General,
need is some
don't you think,
manpower
Senator,
that Germany and these other countries can put up.
Don't you think that the Germans should show their good faith and contribute to the European army? They're supposed to contribute 12 divisions. Now, don't you think we should wait and see what they're going to do with reference to their participating in that European army before we say we hand them on a silver platter complete sovereignty, give them amnesty and clemency to all their war criminals, give them the Saar Basin, reduce their contributions to NATO, end our army of occupation, and give them complete sovereignty. Do all that which we seem to be doing before we get anything from the Germans. To me, seems
well, Congressman,
tragic.
I would say that the question on that is whether we're sure the Russians are going to wait until all those things have been determined. I think that we're in a period of danger. The year 1952 may be a year of decision as far as the Soviet rulers are concerned. They may think the divisions of an American presidential campaign is a year to move.
Our time has come to an end. Thank you, Senator Knowland, and you, Congressman Seller, for a most interesting discussion. And now, before we tell you about next week's guests and our subject, here is an important message.